the head of photography, but I happen to be here with Casey Wayland today. He is, I don't want to fanboy too hard, but I've been singing his praises for a while. He is the writer and director and producer, and man behind We're Alive, A Story of Survival. That's the first place that I ran across him. And that is an audio drama. It's sort of like an audio book, but stepped up to the next level. And has also done many other things like Bronzeville. Recently came out with Motel Evil, which is an Audible original. So if you have Audible, you can just go listen to that. It's great. And in just over 2 weeks, we'll be coming out with an audio drama for The Division, which is really exciting for me because I love that game. I love that premise, and it's a really cool little thing. So, welcome, Casey. How you doing?
Thank you, Sean. I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here virtually in Maine. Hopefully, we'll be able to be in person. Who knows when again? Yep. But thank you for having me. This is a really great to be part of this great thing.
Yeah. All right. So I prefaced this, and I told Casey that I would be asking him 2 really weird questions. So one of them I don't expect an answer for. The first one, in We're Alive, why did you kill everybody that I love?
I like to make you cry.
So we're going to do our best to not spoil anything for any of the things that Casey has done. Things may slip, but that is a slight spoiler warning. But Story of Survival, it's a zombie story. Shockingly, people die. So yeah, why do you kill people that I love? You want to make me cry. Got it. And it worked. You definitely did that.
Well, I can do follow up to that. So I can. Do you want me to elaborate a little further?
Oh, sure. Please do.
I will say that a lot of times people have given me grief about killing off their favorite characters here and there. And I will say that most of the time, I'd say 98% of the time, they have been so thought out ahead of time that to me, it's not like killing off a character. It's just me arriving at the point where their characters die, because it's already been planned out. It's just in a story of survival, not everybody can live, and the weight of what can happen in this world, living and dying, has to sometimes be realized in losing a few people.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I like your tears.
They
feed my soul.
They fuel it, yeah. And then the other weird question. So when I'm in an Uber or a Lyft, or I'm meeting someone for the first time, it's sometimes hard to make conversation, right? So this is my opening question for a lot of people. You're on death row. I don't care why. What's your last meal?
Surf and turf, lobster and steak.
Okay. All right. I know I've had answers from all the way from surf and turf down to a Big Mac meal.
No, how would anybody want a Big Mac? I mean,
you could do so much better.
I mean, if we're gonna be realistic, I'd be like, I want an endangered species of lobster. No, I'm just joking.
I want the orange one or the blue one.
If I'm going out, a whole species is going with me.
Yeah, my safe answer is almost always Thanksgiving dinner, because you get so many little things.
Yeah. Cooked by a certain person, done a certain way, grandma's sweet potatoes. Oh, you tempt me.
All right. So my first big question for you sort of centers around the Story of Survival. So that is 48 chapters long. That was run over, I think, about 6 years, with the little gaps for production. How much of that was written out in advance? Did you have a framework? Did you have all the story beats? How much of it was done ahead of time?
Majority of it was actually done the very first sit down when I was sitting. I remember when I first came up with the outline for actually what ended up being the first 2 seasons, which actually I was thinking at the time was going to be 1 season, but then I realized I wanted to do too much in 1 season. You got to spread this out a little bit. So I remember sitting down on my bed, my wife was there, just outlining the first 2 seasons. But then I had a couple little iterations I wanted to go. One of the things that I sort of realized is that if I plan too far ahead, then I wouldn't have as much flexibility in what happens with certain characters, but I still needed to know what my destination was going to be and how it was going to close at the end. Because if it just went on forever without any direction, then you've seen these stories. That's not fun that way. So 2 seasons really was planned out to have a lot of that, plus also a lot of the iterations of what happens in the last 2, just to kind of keep things interesting. But then when I met the characters and then we started building from there, then I did some readjusting, changed some stuff. There was a couple little things that got, moved along the way because of just talent availability. Some people weren't available, so I moved some things around. But for the most part, a good chunk of that series was done ahead of time and then kind of built from there.
That's cool. And that's, I mean, not critiquing, but that sounds really smart to leave yourself the flexibility to move forward from there. Because if you're too rigid, you're absolutely right. You paint yourself into corners, and if someone's not available to do a voice, then what do? You're stuck.
Yeah, we mostly did that, and luckily we planned ahead enough to where, like, if someone was leaving, then we just kind of they weren't in that next episode, but then what they did was picked up in the one following. And there was a couple occasions where we had to go to record somebody and do something last minute just because of availability. But for the most part, we were pretty good about of seeing stuff down the tracks. Now I'm actually very different with the way I do things. Is I try to record all at once and then take the time to do the production afterwards because of availability like that. It's actually just in the broad scheme of things, it's actually cheaper to do it that way. That way, you condense your recording times, and say, for instance, you have 10 scenes with you do them all at one time rather than spreading them out over several weeks, and then they're just sitting there waiting.
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing for anybody who's watching, we are going to do questions. Feel free to post them in chat as they come up, and if they're part of the conversation that we're having right now, we'll sort of pass them along. So speaking of planning and plotting, this is from KF in chat. What are some of the particular creative challenges of the audio drama medium? For example, things that might work in a more visual medium but require different solutions in audio.
I'd say number one is action, fight sequences, trying to communicate to the audience what someone looks like, because that's one of the hardest things to do, is because if you're stopping completely and saying, oh, he looked at me with a furrowed brow, with chiseled jaw, or even describing someone's hair, you got to find creative ways to sort of inject the exposition and not make it sound clunky. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, hey, he's got a gun. It's like, no, there's better ways to do that with sound effects and clever ways of writing around that. But it's still hard to get character descriptions, like what they look like, and some colorization to the world, like a red banner or something like that. Like, you have to actually inject colors because the medium is very blind that way.
Yeah, I still remember when with Story of Survival, some of the characters like Bert, hearing his description and then seeing the official, I don't know, it was official fan art, but I saw an art of Bert. I was just like, yeah, that's what I heard. That's it. Yeah, they nailed it. There it is. And so that's very, very interesting.
There is a gray area with characters, because when you hear a voice, I mean, it's not where you don't get a voice, you just get a description. But with this, when you get a voice, your brain is actually going to start formulating what you think the character is going to look like, which is kind of fun, which means that you're, as an audience, are participating in it.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I love
theater for the mind thing.
And that's the whole theater of the mind thing, exactly. And that's why I love, and that's why books are so important to people, is because you get to come up with those images in your head. And audiobooks are just an extension of that. They just, audiobooks and audio for the mind, that type of thing, are an extension of that.
It's the in-between film and book. It gives you some interpretation. The one thing I think that we get to do that books don't get to do is we get to hide more stuff, like in the audio, like a performance. Like, I can have someone lie to you in the performance. A book may not know it's a lie.
Right.
unless you like blatantly put it in there.
Yeah. He lied.
I could tell he was lying by the way he furrowed his brow and winked at me.
And so to keep going on that, why did you decide to pursue audio drama? Why the theater for the mind? Why go down this path that I don't want to say no one else is doing, but I don't think many people are doing?
Yeah, I mean, especially when we started, there were, I think, in total, maybe 4 or 5 fiction audio dramas that were actually, doing much of anything. There were some that like people did some little couple episodes and then dropped off the face of the planet. But back when we first started, nobody was doing it. Podcasts had to be synced via a cable. You couldn't download on your phones. I went into this. I started doing. I've done a lot of stuff before I did audio. I did animation. I did documentaries. I did short films. All these different things. And animation was actually the last one I left off on before I went into this medium. And I worked like 2 years for something that was 18 minutes. And I just felt like that's a long time to be working on something. And I mean like 2 solid years of like rigging characters, doing texturing, animation, like motion capture. I would do the gamut, and then you're rendering it on stations. It got really, really difficult. And then the end result, honestly, was not as good as what the recorded audio was for the characters that we did. And I was like, I can write something and do it in audio and really make it make sense, fill the world out, let people get attached to these characters and build something really big and do whatever I want to do with audio, not work. This is great. And so for me as a writer, because I wrote screenplays, and I dusted off one of my ideas and said, hey, this idea that because We're Alive sort of started a little bit from when I was overseas in Iraq. One of the concepts for it, I was like, hey, why don't I do this in audio? Because my big plan was actually I wanted to do a serialized show about zombies on TV, because no one was doing that back in 2009. I was like, oh, this is revolutionary. No one does this show. And then like 2 years later, we know that other show came out.
See, every time someone brings that up, I'm like, garbage compared to We're Alive. Not even compared. Not even, no good. The only thing that they have going for them is, I guess they're still sort of going. It's weird now, but
still, I mean, more power to them. My view on humanity is very different.
Yeah, and I feel like
a little bit of a hopeful story.
Yeah, and your story ended, which was, great.
Well, everything has to have a beginning, middle, and end. I mean, I have another story to tell now, but the next one we're going to tell, actually, it takes place 17 years after the original story, which is like a big, great leap in time for us, which is going to be fun.
Yeah, that one's Descendants, right?
Yep, that's the next one, which hopefully will be coming out in the next year or so. COVID kind of threw us a ringer on that one. We were actually recording in March of last year.
Oh, okay.
And then next week,
shut her down. Yep. So we in the We're Alive universe, we've got Story of Survival. We've got Lockdown, which is its own sort of complete offshoot, which has its threads that tie back. And then we've got Gold Rush, which is it's a story that sort of splits off halfway through one of the seasons and comes back.
Yeah, we go back in time and kind of go in between there.
Yeah.
It moves us forward a little bit too, because it's actually in the future, but it looks back in time. Yeah.
Yes. Are there do you have any other thoughts about doing any other like side things? Like I'm trying to think of, this is a little spoilery, any of the like Boulder type stuff, anything up there? Any other?
Some of that will actually be coming out in Descendants. So the next 2 that we have is Descendants, which is actually going to give us a little bit more of some of these side stories and continue off in the world. So we're going to fill in some blanks there. But then the last side story, which is truly a side story that we're doing, is called Scout's Honor. And that one we just finished the script for. I've been working on that one since 2017, just because it took long, and it actually takes place on Catalina, which is off the shores of California, with a different cast of characters. It's the story of a group of scouts, both boys and girls, who are on in Emerald Bay on one end of the island when the outbreak happens. So they have to find their way off the island, and they discover everything that goes along. And it's sort of like the Lord of the Flies meets the We're Alive universe, and it's a great story. And it's the reason why it took us, what is it, 4 years now to get the script all in place and get it perfect, because it's a really fun story. It's a coming of age story, but also, gives us that aspect of, kids in this world and how you deal with it and how they grow up so fast. And it's been really fun to tell that story. And we even went to the island to try and get it as authentic as possible and walk the footsteps of what the scouts do.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Story of Survival just didn't seem to have a lot of, and it makes sense because it's the apocalypse. There weren't a lot of kids around.
They all died.
Yeah, that it's.
I mean, that's the realist in me, and that's why there was only like maybe one or two. The production person in me was like, kids are just a little hard to deal with. That's why we only had one. There was supposed to be two, and I cut it down to one. But because it's hard to cast kids. Also, the longer you take, the more they grow up. So you have to do something in one recording session, which is why Scouts Honor, you had to write all of it first before you can move on.
Yep.
But that was the other reason, is because kids are slow. Kids aren't adults, and the survival of the people, 99.97% of people didn't make it through the end of or the basically the D-Day of We're Alive. So of those, not many, honestly. It's sad, I know.
Yeah, it is, but that's the reality of a doomsday survival story. So, all right. So one of the other questions, and this is kind of a jokey question, but again, I've spent most of my time in the We're Alive verse, so that's where most of my questions will probably come from. But who's your favorite kid? Who's your favorite person? Who's your favorite character?
Oh,
I'm gonna make you pick your favorite child.
You mean brainchild, right?
Yeah. Not kids, but all of your creations. Who's your favorite?
I have to say CJ.
Yeah.
And the reason why, I mean, people are like, no character is everyone. You can't love every character at every point in the story, because that's just not who people are.
Oh no, they are flawed. Absolutely.
I mean, everybody wants, but for me, she was like one of the most ideal leaders. Almost like Michael has a lot of flaws. Michael is a lot of parts of me, but a lot of the bad parts of me as well, put into that character. Whereas CJ, like she just had a good plan. She has a great execution. She may not be perfect, but really she puts her brain to it and she figures it out logically. She's a pretty good leader. And she's able to bring people together and really bring out the strengths in people. And that is, to me, one of my favorite characters for that reason. And why she, continues on doing as much as she does throughout the story.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's a great choice.
And coincidentally, was going to be my daughter's name if I had a girl instead of a boy.
Oh, really?
Was going to be Casey Jr.
Okay. All right. There we go. See, we're getting some deep lore here.
But I had a boy whose actual real name is August Nicholas Wayland. So you have Nicholas.
There it is.
Is actually so some people don't know this, but Lizzie is my wife, Blair, and the name of her grandfather was Nicholas, and also August. So those are her two grandfathers' names. So so anybody who's deep in lore of We're Alive might know those names for some reason, and I'll leave it at that.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so any other questions coming up in chat while I'm trying to think of something else? Do you want to talk about so the Motel Evil just came out?
Yeah.
How did that come to be? Who reached out to who? Where did that come from?
So it's really interesting. Right before the pandemic hit last year, we were going to England. We actually went to Pod UK, which was like the last convention that I got to do before everything went down. And I actually did a presentation on Gold Rush, talking about like how you can use sound and music and character and all the different pieces of the audio palette to do storytelling. And it just so happened that a couple of representatives from Audible were there, and they said, "Hey, we have this company, a gaming company. You may know them, Ubisoft. They're looking to do an audio drama version for one of their games." And I was like, "Oh, great. Yeah, let's figure that out." And they were like, "Yeah, we're looking for somebody to write it and sort of create something within their lore of their world." And I was like, "Awesome, I can totally do that." And then he said, "Do you have anything else that you're interested in producing? Maybe we could just do like more than one at the same time." I'm like, okay. So weirdly enough, like Motel Evil was a story that I created, like a whole package for. That had all the characters, the storyline, like because it's essentially a murder mystery at the northernmost city in the United States, Barrow, Alaska, which is not called Barrow anymore. It was called something else at the time. It takes place in 1995. And so I gave them the package, and they said, would you like this? Does this sound good to you? And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it. We'll do both." And I'm like, "Great." Now I gotta write two at the same time. And so, but it was a lot of fun because one of the great things about doing a story like Motel Evil is it's very sound based. It's like it's a murder mystery, but the perspective of each character has on what happens and when of the murders, and this cold place of the dead winter of Alaska is really fun. So we got to do some really fun things inside of this audio landscape that is this murder mystery, and you can be in the room with the killer and not know who it is, which is always fun for audio.
Yeah, it's very much a Clue-esque adventure.
It's like, who did it with in here and in here, and
Yep.
then more deaths start happening.
Yep.
And that's always the tricky part, is like, how do you keep on adding these things, but you don't want someone to figure it out, but you do, and like it has to make sense, and you got to get these red herrings to finger point, but they all have to make sense, and still be a very good character-based drama. So it was actually one of the more complex things I've had to write for that reason, because it's so incubated in this one location. It can't go anywhere else. So you have one, motel that it all has to take place in. And honestly, it would be like a great, film to do, because it's, a single location with a bunch of characters. Yep. And that was side of the idea, is to make it simple.
And so you touched on The Division a little bit, which is a video game about so the first Division there was a pandemic that was spread by people touching money. Mm-hmm. It was spread on that around Christmas time. It was set in winter. Yep. And so I'm not sure where the audio drama is set in either Division 1 or Division 2. But so you said that this happened, you started writing this around the pandemic then?
Yeah. So, well, to answer your question, actually, I can tell you it's actually it takes place like sort of simultaneously with Division 1.
Okay.
So it's it follows a character who is a member of the Division throughout like the process of getting recruited, and then everything happening, and them getting called up and having to deal with it, and everything that ensues after that as the story unfolds. But yeah, so this story, when we first brought it together and they were looking to get it done, like I was writing it in the beginning of the pandemic, and actually as I was continuing to write the story, because it took about it's a 6-part drama that's like 5 hours, so it takes a little while to write these things. And so I believe around like the middle chapter, I actually got COVID and had to deal with writing about this outbreak at the same time as having it. And it was really interesting, because it kind of brought home a little bit of the emotions of the characters, of what they would be dealing with, like how they could cope with that process, what it's like to live in this time and space, and everyone kind of deal with it and have some perspective. So we also tried to make sure that we had a certain sensitivity to it, that we didn't, we were trying to make it as true to the story, but also like keep in mind that people are dealing with all this stuff right now and may have dealt with losing a loved one through all this process. So it was really tricky. It was really tricky, but I think it's all come together like clockwork. The people involved, the voices, we got an amazing cast. We actually were able to get everybody together and record together under COVID conditions, which was, that's tough.
Yeah.
Getting everyone tested every 2 days, taking temperatures, masks, offset, just it got tricky. It got real tricky. But I mean, just the dynamics of getting everyone in the same room to read off of each other and be able to, because there's a lot of action sequences. It's just like We're Alive in that way, where we don't shy away from, events and drama and really get in the thick of it and, let stuff happen instead of just the talking heads that a lot of audio dramas tend to do.
Yeah, I remember watching some of the behind the scenes stuff or even like the live readings of some of the We're Alive things, and watching the actors act and portray these things with each other. I'm like, they couldn't do this over Zoom. They couldn't do this on their own, just talking into a mic and like reading their lines. That'd be impossible. So
no, and honestly, you can hear it too, because I mean, you usually have the recording space that you're in usually embodies and gets into your recording of what it is that you're trying to say, and so that can muck things up. But also, the actors need to react. They need to interchange with each other. I mean, talking about this topic of like theater for the mind, just because I'm in a location now where we just got done recording 5 days of material. I'll even this here. This is actually which is a hefty amount of a binder here. And one of the things that is really big is that interactivity, because when you are emotionally attached to something or interacting with someone and there's an emotional energy that has to be carried on between the actors, and without it, it doesn't work. Like there were moments in We're Alive I can remember going back and the entire cast is just bawling. That doesn't happen when you're separated. It just doesn't.
It just can't.
No.
Yeah.
And a lot of people tell me like, oh no, but we can do it in the pandemic remotely. We just send them kits. And I'm like, no, spend the time, spend the effort. Maybe you won't be able to get everybody you possibly want into the same room at the same time. But if you can get as many people as possible and get emotional reality, then it's going to feel real. It's like on films, stand-ins just don't work. They just don't work as well as that genuine, chemistry between two people.
Yeah, and I truly appreciate that, because I have seen, this is just the example. I saw In the Heights recently, and there was this really jarring like cut to a couple of scenes where it's very obvious that they reshot something, and there's an actor on a green screen, and I'm just like, it took me so out. I was like, so, and I understand you have to do that sometimes, but like if you can avoid it, if you can do it the right way, and I appreciate that you want to do it the right way.
Yeah, no, and that's genuinely it. Is you can do something quick and easy, but it's not always. I mean, you have to have some dramatic soul, and really get to the heart of the story. And as a storyteller, why not make this best as possible and work sewn together in an audio editing program?
Yeah. And to sort of touch on something you said earlier about how long it takes you to write these things, and you're like, oh, it's it's a 5-hour thing. It takes a while to write that. Well, yeah, if you really think about that, that's 3 movies that you have to write not only the dialogue for, but also all of the audio components for, because you have to be like, and here's where a gun gets pulled, or here's where they're running, and like you have to think about all those things. So you're not just writing the dialogue, you're writing all the things around that too. So that's, I fully understand that.
And not only that, but like just to speak on like Descendants, like the next iteration of We're Alive, that has taken like 6 years to write, because it's building off of a universe that's already got a huge amount of content, and you want to make sure that things make sense and it progresses. You don't want to be, okay, let's just journey, we'll figure it out as we go along. It's a house of cards. You have to make sure you have a really good foundation and build from there. Otherwise, it just will collapse. And that definitely not something you want to do with the story that you spend, this long put together.
Yeah, and I think I'm easy to please, so I think I'd be psyched either way. But you've got some pretty like fervent fans out there that if you do just the wrong thing, they're not going to be pleased. So
no, like Bert, we need to know what's going on with Bert at 85. Is he still kicking it? Is he still doing things? What's his status? There's a lot there, and also there's some risks that you have to take and sort of break the mold and start anew with a new series, and you can do that, but you need to make sure that's done properly.
Yep, absolutely. A good question again from chat from KF. Are there any other genres or styles of audio drama stories that you'd like to try or think would be fun or interesting to try?
There's a couple actually that I think would be really fun to do. One of them I can't really speak of because it's sort of a work in progress, which I'll glaze over. But really abstract art versions where sound is an entire dimension of things, and I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of really some abstract storytelling that can be done via sound.
What does that mean? Oh no.
I don't want to go too far into it, but
we'll talk after. We'll talk after.
Sure, I'll give you some fleshed out details. But there literally is a story that I want to tell. That's a lot of it is very sound based, very like it could not exist as not an audio drama. Like it couldn't be made. It can't be written. It has to be audio. So very, very interesting and somewhat abstract thing that I've been working on for a while. And it's another one of those stories where like, oh, I got a great idea. Let's, keep on building on it. And then when it's ready, when it's done brewing and percolating, then I'll bring it back. Other ones is comedy I would love to do more of. I experimented a little bit with something called improv effects, where we had actors come in and we would improvise and then we would build a world of sound around them. And actually there's a whole bunch of them that are available online if anybody's interested. It's called improv effects and on podcast places where those were fun. I mean, I really love doing comedy. I think that's a genre that's really out there. That's kind of fun. I think that there is, and I hope I'm not judged too much by this, but sort of the erotic audio, I think is an area that a lot of people haven't really done a great amount of things in. Video is very medium where you could do a lot of things in the storytelling that's borderline really racy, but still recorded with people in front of a microphone in front of in a studio like this. That's totally safe and fun, but yet still edgy and still like romantic and stuff, like kind of fun little storylines like that. So I think that's another really fun one. I think there's a lot of mediums that and genres that can still find their way in the audio world that can work in storytelling, because it's kind of limitless as long as you can find a way to communicate that with the audience. Because one of my sayings is like, confusion is the killer of audio dramas. If you have something that's really good and concrete and the audience understands what's going on, you can almost do any type of storytelling.
Yep. To sort of touch on a couple things there, comedy you've already nailed. Gold Rush was hilarious. It was really good.
Well, thank you. It was hard. It was, I mean, the comedy and audio is one of the hardest things because visual gags are a big thing, and you don't get that in audio. You got to find new ways of doing audio with cuts and movements and character. And
yep.
your palette in comedy is a lot more limited.
Yeah, and to sort of touch on the erotic part, I think that you're right that there have been a lot of people who have tried to do it, but I don't think anybody has quite given it the respect that you might, or someone of your genre might. So that is an interesting sort of angle. I've never really quite thought about it that way. So
yeah, and there is one other genre that I am getting into that I will tease, that another story that I'm working on that's hopefully going to go into production here. Written, all of the episodes are done for the first season. It's a Western. And it goes back to the turn of the century, and you get to feel the grit of the road and all these different atmospheres and characters, and really feel what it was like to be in that time, because it's historical stuff is great, like we did with Bronzeville, because you can put somebody in a place and time and their mind will fill in the rest, as long as you get the sound to be authentic. And this one, I've already gone out and recorded herds of cattle to try and get like the right cattle sounds and stuff. Really hard to do, by the way.
Yeah.
Cattle are not very responsive, and they're pretty quiet, to be honest.
Not good actors.
No, they don't move when you want them to.
So the division, it's Hearts on Fire, right? Is what it's called.
Yeah, Division Hearts on Fire.
So that's complete. That's done. It's just waiting to be released.
Yeah, we finished that one up the last touch on like last week. So we recorded in February, and it's really complex, but it's a great story, and it's less than a month away.
And so you've got, you were talking about the binder that you had right now. How many, and you're talking about Descendants and Scouts Honor, how many projects do you have in the pipe? Because you've been talking about a lot of different stuff. And I understand as a writer, I know a few writers, like you have a lot of notebooks that you throw things into.
Mm-hmm.
So how many notebooks do you have? How many projects are rolling right now?
I think there's about 6. And people are like, why do you do this to yourself? But here's the reality of it is, people who are like come from the movie industry or TV industry know sometimes an idea or an execution of an idea takes a long time because of a lot of other various aspects that you have to deal with. Like the Western one I'm talking about. That one, actually, the conversation started back in like 2016 for it, but it took a long time for clearances, for lawyers, for all this stuff to get in place, partnership deals, funding amounts. Then you have a budget approval, and then you have distribution. Like so many things happen that you can sort of, an idea is just the start of the execution. But then there's also like there's casting, recording, production, paying for those things, getting talent attached and involved. Sometimes you're like sending an offer out to a talent and it takes a while to get back. So every single project has a various degree of where it's at in the pipeline and stage. And sometimes it's just sitting there. Like the Western sat for a long time, especially with the pandemic happening. It's like, well, okay, finally it's able to move. And I never want to let a good story die. It's sometimes better to delay it rather than push something out the door that's just not ready.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've seen so many things rush to production that didn't need to be. You know, and you know, I know that there's a lot of, like, logically I can put together that there's a lot of business stuff that happens behind my favorite episodes coming out, but I just want more. Just like,
yeah,
come on.
Me too. It just that's the thing that I love is the creative engine. The thing that I hate is the paperwork production engine that requires, but you have to. It's something that, like, you can't have one without the other. Same with the TV and movie industry. You can't, you got to pay for it. It's like that's the brass honest truth of it is you have to have the fuel to the fire for it to do anything.
Yep, absolutely. So sort of stepping out of the audioverse a little bit, what is your, maybe not favorite, but like, I guess favorite's the best way to put it. What's your favorite, like, movie? What's your maybe top 2 or top 3? Like, if someone were to say, what's your favorite movie? What would first come to mind?
I'll give you 3.
Okay.
They're all very different from each other, but they all have the elements of things that I really love about storytelling. The number 1 is Gattaca. And the reason why is because for me, I'm one of those dreamers who thinks that if you work hard enough, if you put your soul into something, then you can make it happen. And the theme of Gattaca is there's no gene for the human spirit. Like, no matter what people tell you can do or want to pigeonhole you into, you shouldn't let that be your limitation. And this character is the embodiment of that. And for me, that's whenever I feel down or feel like I'm not, matching the potential of the things I want to do, I look at that and I go, okay, it reassures me. It gives me hope. It gives me something that gives me drive. So that's like my elixir movie that I love watching. My next one is Shawshank Redemption. It's one of these stories where it's like it's again that human spirit thing about like you have this character who's in a soul crushing world who did not let it get the better of them. And for me, I mean, I was prior service, I was in the military, and I was in some bad situations and or times when you feel like you have no control of yourself because you don't. You're one little wheel in a big machine that is the military, and it feels sometimes like prison. You don't have control of yourself anymore. But you can't let it get the best of you. You have to make the most of any situation. That's what. And the last one is About Time. People may not have seen that movie, but it's like a time traveler's tale. But it's got a really good heart and soul about making your day worth living and treating people as they should be treated and never taking something for granted. And man, I cry like a baby every time I watch that movie because it's just I see a common theme with all the stories that I love, and it's all about something to inspire you and something that gives you something that fuels your fire. And I think that's something that art does, and I hope that I can do that in some ways for other people.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm gonna go watch About Time then. So excellent.
If you haven't, get yourself a box of tissues. It's a mad cry.
Absolutely. Have you seen? This isn't about me, but have you seen the movie Arrival?
The Arrival, yeah. With the aliens coming down, they have to like find a way to translate to them.
Yeah, that's my number one. Like I gush about that movie a ton because it's like again about communication and all that, and I love that. So
yeah, and honestly, it's I think one of the most realistic movies about communication and if we were actually to meet a species, that seems like it's the most likely thing.
Yeah,
and it's kind of topical too with all these freaking UFO sightings that have been happening lately, like over China and stuff. Like that triangle thing that came out this week. I was like, oh my God. I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but man, these what we're seeing lately on this UFO thing. Woo.
Maybe you should do an alien drama.
I have thought about it. I have definitely thought about it because it's one of those areas I haven't touched as alien. More and more, it's seeming like it's a thing.
Yep. So I think we are getting towards the end. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Plug?
Well, I mean, I could do a shameless plug. I'll do it anyway.
Do it.
If anybody's actually looking to do things in audio theater, if they're a storyteller, they're like, hey, I'd love to get into doing audio storytelling. I don't know where to begin. I actually did write a book. Now, I'm not trying to say buy the book and write something because you can write it on your own. But one of the things, the book's called Bombs Always Beep, and it's on bombsalwaysbeep.com. And the title itself is just meant to be that in the audio world, communicating through audio is very important. It's about efficiency. It's about also finding things in the story to try and communicate through audio. And one of the things I try to do in this book is sort of outline that a bit, is like give you an idea of how it is to communicate something. What are some of the things that are lost? Like I was talking about earlier, colors. Colors are something that unless you say it's a red van, you could just say it's a van, or you could say it's a red van, and you're painting that picture for your audience to understand a little bit more clearly. Things like that it's all about communication. It's all about being able to have something go from one medium to the next and in someone's imagination, and giving them all the tools to give them at that. It's sort of it's like been my production manual of just giving it to crew members. It's like, oh, hey, how do we do this? Like today when we're on set here, like script supervising, like how do you label a script and mark it for all the takes and all these sorts of things that are required for the post-production process. Because I mean, if you're recording, like I think we've recorded in probably about 20 hours of material. How do you find one single dialogue line if you're looking for it? Unless you're tracking it, you could lose it. So that's sort of the idea, is just to give a process of how to do this. Maybe get some inspiration for somebody who may be, you know, looking to write and doesn't know where to start. It kind of gives a good little a starting block for that.
Gives you the framework. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, somewhere to start.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've got Motel Evil on Audible now. Hearts on Fire to the Division. Is that Audible original again as well? Is that something you have to spend a credit on, or is that just available for Audible people?
I believe it's available for all Audible people. I believe Hearts on Fire is going to be part of their like subscription podcast service. So if you're subscribed to them, then you'll be able to download and listen to it. So you'll be able to listen to Hearts on Fire, and coming out in July is Gold Rush on Audible.
So yeah.
To it.
By the way, you asked for quotes for the cover art. I put one on the fan page. Did mine make it?
I don't know.
Oh my God. Come on, Casey.
I don't know what Audible approved. I sent them all of them. So the one that you sent did go in.
Okay, good. All right, that's good enough for me.
They were like, hey, we need some quotes for this. So I sent them all to Blackstone, who was the publisher of that. And so they were hopefully doing that. I don't know which ones they selected. I gave them a whole slew of them. It was actually really cool because Gold Rush was a story that was a lot of risks for me, because it wasn't conventional storytelling. It wasn't conventional zombies. It focused on characters. It took some risks. It did some wacky things. We had some fun with it. Even for me, my favorite scene that I think I've ever put together, where they're playing the violin and escaping at the same time. It doesn't spoil anything, hopefully. And stuff like that you can only do in audio. And so, yeah, I think it's really fun that the people that really enjoyed it, because there were some that didn't, and that's fine, because they're like, I want more zombies, I want more fashy bashy, and it's like, you can watch Army of the Dead for that, and let's see how that, just saying. Yeah,
I absolutely loved Gold Rush, and you know, I don't like comparing it to Story of Survival, because they're different animals. They're very, very different. But Gold Rush I absolutely love. So yeah, that's
what they're meant. I mean, that's why I do these side stories, is we get to try something different.
Yeah.
Like Lockdown, which was the second mini series, was all about the claustrophobic environment. You're stuck in this place, you can't escape. How do you get out? It's almost a locked box. And that was really fun for me. Is like it's almost like an escape room story, and that was the fun of it. Scout's Honor is very different as well. It's all coming of age. It's like, how would you deal with this as a kid? What did you deal with as a kid? Like, what were some of the shortcomings? And how do you be a kid in the end of the world? Like, what sort of priorities do you have? What are you going through at that time? And so it's really fun to like kind of put myself back in when I went to Catalina as a camper, as a scout back when I was like, I don't know, 14 or so, and be like, hey, what if it happened? You know, have fun with that. That's the joy of doing these isolated ones.
Yeah, so We're Alive Story of Survival is split up into 4 seasons, and all 4 seasons are available on Audible. Lockdown is available on Audible, and Gold Rush will be available in July.
Yep, the 17th, which is 2 days after Vision. So I got a lot of releases coming up in July.
And if you want to get a taste of these stories as well, they are available on Spotify with ads, so you can listen to them there. I think that pretty much wraps us up.
And Apple Podcasts.
Podcasts too. That's right.
Yeah, and if anybody's also interested, there's another one which is Bronzeville, which is available out there. Which is we just did our 2nd season of that, starring Lawrence Fishburne, Lorenz Tate, a whole slew of really amazing actors, just sort of in the style of the audio theater for the mind that we do. but just different. And it's pretty cool. It was really fun. There's some amazing actors in there that you're gonna just get blown away with in season 2.
Cool. Well, thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you, Casey. Like I said, I did my best to not fanboy too hard, but I really
No,
appreciate
this was
it.
great. I'm talking about the stuff. It's good to remind ourselves of this, and also tease some of the things that are coming up, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope everybody who's watching enjoys the rest of their PortCon.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your questions, and thanks for coming out today. Cheers.
Take care, everybody.